The lobby of the Hargrove Tower had 32 floors of glass above it, and a doorman who had learned, after 11 years, exactly which guests to greet and which ones to look through. Mira Selden was not the kind of woman he looked through. She was 29 years old, 5'8", and she carried herself the way people do when they have spent years in places where the wrong posture gets you killed. She wore a white button-down tucked into dark slacks, and she had a leather folio under one arm, the kind you buy at an office supply store, not the kind you inherit. She had worked the morning shift at the parking garage 2 blocks east since 6 a.m. She smelled faintly of exhaust and hand sanitizer, and she was standing in the lobby of one of the most expensive commercial buildings in Atlanta because she had an appointment. Not an invitation. An appointment. There is a difference, and the man behind the front desk understood it immediately. "Deliveries go around back," he said, without looking up. Mira stopped walking. She did not raise her voice. She had learned a long time ago that raising your voice in rooms like this one was exactly what they were waiting for. "I have a 2 o'clock with Fletcher Dunn in talent acquisitions," she said. "My name is Mira Selden. I submitted my portfolio 3 weeks ago. I received a confirmation email on the 14th. The man looked up then. He looked at her the way certain people look at a bill they don't want to pay, like if he waited long enough, it might just go away. "I'll need to call up," he said. "Please do," Mira said. She stood there while he made the call. She counted the seconds the way she had been trained to count them. Not out of impatience, but because counting kept the anger from landing somewhere it didn't belong. She had learned that in Kandahar. She had learned a lot of things in Kandahar. She was at 47 seconds when the elevator at the far end of the lobby opened, and a man in a charcoal suit stepped out with the particular energy of someone who had never once in his life been told to go around back. His name was Fletcher Dunn. She recognized him from the company website, silver-haired, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who played golf on Sundays and called it networking. He was on the phone. He did not look at her. He walked through the lobby toward the exit with his driver 3 steps behind him and his jacket already half over one shoulder. She had been waiting for this meeting for 3 weeks. She stepped forward. "Mr. Dunn," she said. He kept walking. "Mr. Dunn, I'm Mira Selden. We have a 2 o'clock. He stopped then, not for her exactly, but because the word 2 o'clock carries a certain weight when you are a man with a calendar. He turned, he looked at her, and something shifted in his face that she recognized the way you recognize weather. Not from seeing it, but from feeling it in your bones before it arrives. "The 2 o'clock," he said to his phone rather than to her. He lowered it slightly. "You're the graphic design candidate. Branding and visual strategy," she said. "Yes." He looked at her folio. He looked at her slacks. He looked at her face, which was composed and still, and gave him absolutely nothing to work with. "I don't have time for this today," he said. "The appointment was confirmed. Reschedule with my assistant." He was already turning back toward the door. "She'll find you a slot." And then, because he was the kind of man who always needed the last word, always needed the small cruelty that reminded everyone in the room who held the keys, he said it, not loudly, quietly to the man beside him, the way you say something when you want it to be heard but don't want to be held accountable for saying it. "Tell Patrice to stop booking walk-ins," he said. "This isn't a community center." The doorman heard it. The driver heard it. 2 women crossing the lobby heard it and looked away. Mira heard every syllable. She did not move. She did not flinch. She stood in the center of that marble floor, portfolio under her arm, and she watched Fletcher Dunn push through the glass doors to where his car was waiting. And she thought, "I know something you don't know yet." Here is what you need to understand about Mira Selden before the rest of this story makes sense. Her mother, Carolyn, had spent 22 years as a bookkeeper for a mid-size logistics company called Hargrove Transit, which, if that name sounds familiar, is because it was founded by the same family that built Hargrove Tower. She had been meticulous, careful, and, as it turned out, the only person in the accounting department who had noticed that the company's pension fund had been quietly, systematically drained over a period of 9 years. Carolyn had flagged it internally. Twice. The first time, she was told it was an accounting error that was being corrected. The second time, 3 months later, she was let go. They called it a restructuring. She was 54 years old, 2 years from full vesting, and she walked out of that building with a cardboard box and a severance check that covered exactly 6 weeks. She died 11 months later. Heart attack, the death certificate said. Mira, who had been deployed at the time and received the news over a satellite phone in a forward operating base outside of Jalalabad, had always believed the death certificate was only technically correct. Stress will kill you the same as a bullet. It just takes longer and leaves no entry wound. When Mira came home, honorable discharge, 2 commendations, a shoulder that ached when it rained, she found 3 things in her mother's apartment: a storage unit key, a shoebox of bank statements, and a notebook with 47 pages of handwritten figures that Mira Selden had apparently been keeping for the last 4 years of her life. Mira was not a forensic accountant, but she had been an intelligence analyst before she transferred to field operations. She knew how to read patterns. She knew how to build a case from fragments. She spent 8 months with that notebook. And then she applied for a job at Hargrove Tower. She did not go back inside after Fletcher Dunn drove away. She sat on a bench across the street with a coffee she didn't drink, and she thought about the notebook. She thought about the 9 years. She thought about the 6-week severance check and the cardboard box and the satellite phone call. She thought, not yet. She had made this mistake before, in the field, in the years before she understood that patience is not passivity. Patience is a weapon. You simply have to know when to deploy it. There was one thread she hadn't fully pulled yet. One name in her mother's notebook that appeared 11 times across 4 separate years, always in connection with the largest transfers, always initialed rather than spelled out. FD. She had assumed it meant Fletcher Dunn, but assumptions in the field get people killed, and she had decided months ago that she would not move until she was certain. The certainty required access she didn't have. Not yet. She finished her coffee and called her friend. Dominique Ossi had served 2 tours with Mira in the same unit before taking a medical discharge and going into cybersecurity consulting. She was, in Mira's opinion, the most dangerous person she knew in a room with a laptop. She was also, more relevantly, the person who had helped Mira build the file she had been building for 8 months without leaving any fingerprints on it. Dunn walked right past you, Dominique said when Mira called. It was not a question. Didn't even pause. Tell me you didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. A silence. You wanted to. I always want to, Mira said. That's why they gave me the commendation, because I don't. She could hear Dominique typing. They had a shorthand after 6 years. Conversations that ran on 2 tracks simultaneously, the spoken one and the other one. The one where they were both thinking several moves ahead and neither of them needed to say it out loud. The FD question, Mira said. Still working. How much longer? You're asking me to trace internal transfers that were intentionally obfuscated by people who did this for almost a decade, Dominique said. Give me 72 hours. You have 48. Another silence. I hate you. I know, Mira said. Call me when it's done. She worked her morning shifts at the parking garage. She ran 5 miles in the evenings. She went back to her apartment and sat at the kitchen table with the notebook open in front of her and went over it again. Not because she had missed anything, but because she wanted to be ready. She wanted every number in her head, every date, every discrepancy, so that when the moment came there would be no hesitation, no searching for the page, no stumbling. Her mother had stumbled. Carolyn had gone to the right people through the right channels and had been dismissed, and then removed. And then she had died with the knowledge folded inside her, like a stone she was never able to set down. Mira was not going to stumble. On the second evening, she got a call from a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't pick up. She picked up. "Is this Mira Selden?" A woman's voice. Careful, professional, the kind of careful that comes from years of measuring every word before it leaves your mouth. "Who's asking?" "My name is Annette Marsh. I'm an investigative journalist with the Atlanta Constitution. I've been looking into Hargrove Transit's pension fund disbursements for approximately 6 months." A pause. "I received your mother's name from a source at the State Labor Board. I'm sorry for your loss." Mira sat very still at her kitchen table. "What do you want?" she said. "I want to know if you have documentation," Annette said. "I have the macro story, the transfers, the shell companies, the timeline. But I'm missing corroboration from inside the accounting department. Something personal, something that shows it wasn't just a systems error." Another pause. "Your mother worked there for 22 years, and I think she knew." Mira looked at the notebook on the table in front of her. 47 pages. 4 years of careful, meticulous, terrified record-keeping by a woman who had understood exactly what she had found and exactly what it would cost her. She knew, Mira said. They met the next morning at a diner on Peachtree. Annette Marsh was 40-something, natural hair, a recorder on the table that she asked permission before turning on. She had the specific tiredness of someone who had been working a story for a long time without being able to finish it. The kind of tired that isn't about sleep. Mira had brought the notebook. She had also brought 17 months of bank statements, a thumb drive with scanned documents that Dominique had helped her organize, and a printed timeline that ran to 4 pages. She put it on the table. Annette Marsh looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked up. "How long have you had this?" 8 months, Mira said. "I was waiting until I knew who FD was." "Fletcher Dunn," Annette said without hesitation. Mira felt something release in her chest. "You're sure? His signature is on the authorization documents for 3 of the largest transfers. They were routed through a subsidiary in Delaware that he set up personally in 2014. Annette turned the recorder slightly toward her. "He is currently the VP of Talent and Administration for Hargrove Tower LLC, which is the parent company. He has been with the organization in various capacities for 21 years. 21 years. 1 year longer than her mother had worked there." Mira thought about the lobby, the charcoal suit. "This isn't a community center." "What do you need from me?" she said. "I need your mother's records on the record," Annette said. "I need you to go on record as her next of kin, confirming that these documents belong to her and that she was terminated after raising these concerns internally." "And then what?" Annette looked at her steadily. "And then I run the story. It was Dominique who called, 41 hours after their conversation, 7 hours early, which meant she had found something that changed the calculation." "FD isn't just done," she said. "I was wrong about the scope." Mira waited. "There are 2 sets of initials in your mother's notebook. I didn't catch it the first time because the second one only appears 5 times and the handwriting is slightly different. I think your mother wrote them at different times, maybe months apart." Dominique's typing had stopped. "The second set is RH, and RH is not an employee of Hargrove Transit. Then who?" "Russell Hargrove," Dominique said. "The founder's son. He is currently on the board of Hargrove Tower LLC. He is also, according to 3 separate shell company registrations that took me 19 hours to trace, the direct beneficiary of the pension fund transfers." There was a silence on the line. "Mira," Dominique said, "this isn't an employee who was skimming. This is the family." She called Annette from the parking garage, standing between a silver SUV and a concrete pillar, 20 minutes before her shift ended. "I have something else," she said. "Something bigger." "How much bigger?" "Russell Hargrove." The silence on Annette's end was the kind that meant she was doing the same thing Mira had done in the kitchen, sitting very still, recalibrating. "If that's true," Annette said slowly, This isn't a corporate misconduct story. This is fraud at the ownership level. This is pension theft involving, she was calculating, potentially hundreds of former employees. My mother was one of them, Mira said, and there are 47 pages of documentation in her handwriting that connect the dates, the account numbers, and the authorization signatures. Another silence. "Can you meet me in 2 hours?" Annette said. "I'll be there in 1, Mira said. Now here is the part that matters. Here is the part people always want to know. How does it end? Did he go down? Did any of this mean anything? Here is what happened. Annette Marsh published her investigation 6 weeks later. It ran across 3 days, front page, above the fold, with document scans and a timeline graphic and a quote from a labor attorney that called the pension fund situation one of the most deliberate and sustained acts of wage theft this city has seen in 30 years. Fletcher Dunn resigned within 48 hours of the first installment. He did not comment publicly. His attorney released a statement that used the word cooperating 4 times. Russell Hargrove held out for 9 days. Then the state attorney general's office announced it was opening a formal investigation. By the end of the month, there were 3 law firms advertising class action representation for former Hargrove Transit employees. The parking garage where Mira worked was 2 blocks from Hargrove Tower. She worked her shifts. She ran her miles. She did not watch the news coverage obsessively. Because she had learned in the field that the moment you start measuring your victories by someone else's collapse, you have already lost something important. But on the morning the first story ran, she walked through the lobby of the building across the street. Not because she had business there, but because she needed to see it. The doorman was at his desk. He looked up when she walked in. He recognized her. She could see it in his face, the slight recalibration, the mental math of who she was and what she carried and what that meant now. He said nothing. She said nothing. She stood in the center of that marble floor for 30 seconds, which is longer than it sounds. And she looked at the elevator where Fletcher Dunn used to step out with his jacket half over his shoulder, and she thought about Carolyn Selden's kitchen table and the shoebox and 47 pages of handwritten figures that a careful woman had spent 4 years writing down because she understood, even when no one would listen, that the truth requires a witness. She had been her mother's witness. She walked back out into the morning, and the door closed behind her, and the sound it made was the sound of something finished.